getting started, is very typical to starting up an account with any other software system. We're going to ask you some basic information about yourself, so your name and contact information and a password to get your account created. And then we'll also ask you for some basic information about your company, including the primary address, and also a business phone number. So once you populate, the sign up form, we're going to go ahead and get set up with our onboarding. So I will call out that if you're doing this live, sometimes it can take us a minute or so to get your account fully set up on our side. So we do have a handy video that usually plays here that can kind of help you understand what you're getting into with your onboarding. But for today, since you're having the demonstration with me, I won't play that video. So let's go ahead and hop into getting set up. The first part of setting up Avalara for small business is we want to know some things about your sales tax compliance for your business. So we'll ask you for some information. The first thing that we want to know is, if you're registered to collect and pay sales tax in more than one state. If you're really small, you probably are just registered in your home state, which is totally fine. But if you're, selling through e-commerce or your sales are going up, you might have already triggered Nexus in a couple of other states and have registered for them. So if you have 2 or more, we'd want to know that option. I'm going to go ahead and select that here. The next option is asking you if you sell through an online marketplace like Amazon or Etsy. We definitely want to help you navigate marketplace facilitation laws, which I'll get into in a little bit. But if you sell on marketplaces like Amazon, Etsy, Walmart, we definitely want to help you setting up those integrations as well. The third prompt here is about needing help to determine sales tax rates for your products or services. Some of you may or may not be familiar that in different states, they might have tax exemption rules based off of the goods or services that you're selling. So some popular categories that often are exempt from tax are food and clothing. And so if you get calculation set up with Avalara for small business, we can help to map your products and services to what we internally refer to as tax codes to make sure that you're getting the right tax rate every time that you're invoicing customers for those goods. And then the last option here is just if you have tax exempt customers. So if you might be selling to customers who are exempt from sales tax. That often includes nonprofit organizations such as churches or schools. So if you are selling to customers who are exempt from tax, we want to help you navigate that as well. I'm going to go ahead and select that option. On the next page, we also want to help you understand what do you want to get set up with first. So Avalara for small business has a couple of core features that are really aimed at helping you to get to not have to deal with sales tax on sales tax. So the first one is monitoring where you might need to register and collect and pay sales tax. This is referring to economic nexus, which I will get into a little bit later, but we have an automated way of tracking your sales to know where you might be getting close to needing to register in a specific state. The second piece is automating your sales tax returns. So you might be logging into the Department of Revenue in your state today, and you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to put this, I want to automate this process. We're definitely here to help you do that. So if that's something that you're interested, you would select that option. And then the third thing is sales tax calculation itself. So that's our AvaTax product that you may or may not be familiar with. I know a lot of platforms today, such as Amazon or Shopify, automatically calculate sales tax for you, but you might be using a system or an ERP where you might want to replace the sales tax calculation that happens when you invoice your customers or during checkout. And that's what AvaTax is really built to do, is to help replace that tax calculation engine when you are generating an invoice, to making sure that you're calculating the most accurate tax. So for today's session, I'm going to walk you through setting up a sales tax return. So I'm going to go ahead and select that option, and we can go ahead and dive in. All right, so what are we looking at right now? We are looking at the home screen of our customer portal. Our customer portal is really your central hub for managing everything related to your Avalara account. So this is where you would log into if you're wanting to look at to get onboarded and set up. And then later I'll get into how you might be using our customer portal to manage your settings or do part of your regular reconciliation and as part of your monthly activities. So I'm going to call your attention to this to-do list here on the left side. This is really your guide in terms of understanding what are the tasks you need to do to get set up. So today, as I mentioned, I'm going to walk you through setting up automating your sales tax returns. And that really starts with the first step of connecting us to your sales channels. So what I mean by that is we have pre-built integrations set up with common marketplace and accounting software such as QuickBooks Online and Etsy. And so by using these integrations, it can help automate to bring in those transactions from your sales channel. So then we can then process those transactions and put them on your state return. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select Etsy and Amazon for this example and click next. And then we'll go through a guided process of setting up our Amazon integration. So the first step, you'll see here that it's just sort of a step-by-step flow of helping you install the integration. And the first step that we would want to know is really how far back do you want to bring in transactions from your sales channel. We typically advise customers to bring in the last 12 months worth of data, since that gives us a healthy amount of data to work with for our economic sales map, which I'll show you in just a bit. And then it also is good in terms of using those transactions to populate the first return you would want to file through Avalara for small business. And then on the next screen, we just want to confirm your settings regarding marketplace facilitation. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with marketplace facilitation, but there are rules in every state or most states that require marketplaces like Amazon to collect and remit sales tax on behalf of their merchants. But depending on the state, you might be liable for still, claiming those sales, even if you're not collecting and paying them. They still want to know that those transactions are happening. And so by bringing in those transactions and understanding which states you are already remitting through Amazon, we can make sure that we're handling those transactions appropriately. So what's really reflected here is we are constantly keeping up with all of the states' marketplace facilitation laws. So these are all the states that have them today. We have those pre-checked. And so it's all like preset based off of those state laws, but we also do have the option to uncheck those if for any reason you might have gone through and are manually collecting sales tax, with Amazon as an example. And then the last step in terms of setting up your Amazon integration is just to authorize Avalara getting access to your information. It will show up in a pop-up. So if you've got a pop-up blocker turned on, sometimes that does happen when you're installing an integration in our customer portal. You can click on this link here and I'll reactivate the pop-up. But we'll usually ask for some key information. In Amazon's case, it's your seller ID and your auth token. And then once you submit that, you are up and running. So we have our first integration set up at this point, which is awesome. Like that's probably one of the hardest parts in terms of just getting the data into our system. So once you go through this initial flow, what's happening on the back end is Avalara will be calling Amazon to pull in those transactions. If you're pulling in a large data set, it can take up to 24 hours for those all to process. But if you want to see them as they're coming in, you could typically click on the transactions tab over here and you'll see the transactions listed as they're coming into our system. But for right now, I'm going to go back to the home screen. So you'll see here on the to-do list, we've already had one task completed and it's moved into the business profile section here. So we're progressing really well. And then we have 2 more steps left in terms of getting set up with returns filing. So the next step is to provide us some information about your state return. So in this case, once again, we're kind of going through a guided step-by-step process to walk you through the process. I'm going to go ahead and show an example of setting up a New Jersey state return. So you would pick your state from the dropdown, and then based off of your state, we'll auto-populate the available forms that are available within that state. So from this list, you would pick the state form that you typically are filing with that state. So in this case, we'll select the quarterly return state form. And then on the next page, we'll need to know some identification information. So this is typically information that you would have gotten during your registration process with the state when you were getting set up initially. And if you ever have trouble, trying to understand, when we say New Jersey account number, what do we mean? We do have tooltips, built into the UI, so you can hover over those, and those will usually give you some tips on where you can find that in your registration information. And then on the next page, we'll just want to confirm your filing frequency. So in this case, we were filing the quarterly return form, so we've already pre-populated that here. But in other cases, that might always be the case. So you can select monthly, quarterly, or annually from the dropdown. And then the final step is to provide your e-file information. So this is what we can use to go through the Department of Revenue site to file the return on your behalf. Okay, so we have our New Jersey state form filled in, which is great. So we've gotten 2 of the 3 steps done. The last step to do is just to link your bank account. So we typically just use a standard bank routing number and account number. So you would provide that in here. And the reason why we do this is, we are really looking to help you automate your sales tax returns filing. So, when you think back to setting up that Amazon integration, that's about bringing your transactions into our system. And the last steps we did about setting up your returns form is knowing, information about your returns. And then the last piece is, finance information. So we have funds to pull from when we remit to the state on your behalf. All right. So at this point, you've pretty much set up the returns portion of Avalara for small business. So if I were to log out right now, my returns would be filed for me on a quarterly basis, and you really have put it on essentially an autopilot. You could definitely come in and do things like here, like I indicated earlier, that Etsy was one of the sales channels I use. So you could finish completing your Etsy integration setup. And then if at any point you ever want to use our AvaTax calculation feature, we have the steps for how to set that up available in here as well. But at this point, you really are set up to be up and running with automating your sales tax returns, which is great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and transition into the second portion of our demo. So let's fast forward to a month later. So I keep saying that we're really helping you to automate, but we do recommend generally that customers come into our customer portal once a month. And that's to do a few things. So one is to do a reconciliation, and I'll kind of show you what that might look like. And the second thing would be just to come in here and also, check your settings and making sure that we are staying accurate with how your business might be changing. And then the third thing is actually that I wanted to call out here is our economic nexus liability map. So, we're looking once again at the home screen of our customer portal. And you can see here on the left side, we've got a summary of your setup and the integrations you have set up, and the returns and settings you might have already set up as well. And then here on the right side, I wanted to call your attention to this map because we have found this is really beneficial for many of our customers. So earlier I had mentioned, tracking economic nexus. I think when I've spoken to customers in the past, a lot of them are doing it manually. We want to help automate that for you. So if you're not really familiar with economic nexus, basically what that means is if you're selling into a state, every state has their own rules around when you need to register with that state to then start collecting and paying sales tax. In some states, it's based off of the number of transactions that you're doing. So 200 transactions might be their threshold, or in other states, it might be based off of the sales volume. So the rules are really custom to the state, and we can help to automate that for you because we're keeping track of all of the state nexus laws and then processing your transactions against our economic nexus analysis. So here we can see on the map that this customer has 3 states lit up. So what this is indicating to them is that they are exceeding the economic nexus threshold, in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. And then the key action there is that customer should really be registering with that state to file sales tax. And so we actually do have state registration services available. So we'll kind of, when you trigger economic nexus, we'll have some good materials to help you figure out how to take action. But this map really helps you keep track of, how you might be progressing towards that threshold. So you can click on the map, see some more detailed information about the map. But this is a really good way to sort of keep track of what your liability is in states that you might not be collecting today. All right, so I'm going to walk through, sort of give you a tour of our customer portal. At the beginning, I went through, how to get set up. I mentioned one of the activities we typically recommend customers do on a monthly cadence is reconciliation. So one of the primary places you would do that is through our transactions tab. And so when I say reconciliation, what I mean is that you're coming into our system and you're looking at the transactions that we have within Avalara and making sure that those reflect accurately with what you would expect within your core sales channels. So for example, you might have updated an invoice after it had posted and it didn't get updated here. And so you might want to come in and make sure that the invoice accurately reflects the sale if you might have added an item to the invoice like post initial transaction. So you can come in and do that here. So reconciliation is just important in terms of just sort of general maintenance. And if you wanted to edit a transaction, you can come in and click an individual line item, and then you would be taken to a detailed overview of that sales invoice where you could either edit the document here or edit at the line level down here. The other reason why I wanted to show this view is that it's also helpful in case you wanted to understand exactly how the tax was calculated. So if you have AvaTax turned on for one of your sales channels, you can come into the customer portal and look at an invoice. And if you click at the line level of the invoice, we'll actually break down how the tax rate was broken down at the local region, and then also based off of a few variables. So, if you're actually collecting tax there, if your customer is taxable, and if the items on the invoice are actually taxable as well. And you can even dig in further if you wanted to, just to really understand the breakdown of how AvaTax was coming up with that tax calculation rate. So the transactions tab is definitely one of the core areas where most of our customers spend their time in our customer portals. It's a really good place when you're doing your reconciliation. All right, I'm going to sort of speed through because I think I've got until 1:15. These other couple of tabs. So the next tab is the customer exemptions tab. You may or may not have customers exempt from sales tax. If you don't, you can sort of ignore this section, but I did want to do a quick intro about this for customers who are selling to exempt customers. So AvaTax has the capability of, when we're processing an invoice, of looking for that customer in our system. And if you have already indicated they're exempt from tax, we won't calculate tax for that customer. So the way to do that would be to come in here and add a customer through the exemptions section. And then you can also come in here and check on the status of those certificates. So if you click at the individual customer level, you'll see the status is valid or expired. And you can also look at previews of the documents that they typically have to provide to you if they are exempt from tax. So it really becomes a really nice place to do your central maintenance or having a central hub for managing all of your certificates relating to your customers. The third tab that I wanted to go through is our returns section. So, as I mentioned before, we have your returns already set to auto file, but if you were to come in here and you just wanted to check on the status of your returns, you could do that through the returns tab. So you'll see down here towards the bottom, we'll indicate if Avalara has already filed this return for you, or if we're in the process of preparing the return. And if we're in the process of preparing the return and you want to actually file it on yourself versus having it auto filed, you can always do that here through the secondary navigation to file this return on your own this month. One thing I did want to call out for this group is, if you want to make any updates to the returns, we do have we do have sort of an editing period for the first 5 days of the month. So if, for your June transactions, if you want to come in and make any updates to that return before we are preparing the filing, we do ask that you make those updates in the first 5 days of the month. And then if you ever want to come in and check on, look up any old returns, you can definitely do that through our returns archive, or you can look at the PDFs copies of the returns that were filed before. Our document section is really a great search tool for you. If at any point in time you ever need to find a transaction or an invoice or an exemption certificate or return, this is a really good central search hub in terms of, instead of having to go to each of these individual tabs to find a document. And then we have our reports tab. So I mentioned, a lot of our customers do their reconciliation through transactions. Some of our customers prefer to do reconciliation, in Excel. And this is a great place to do that, is in the reports tab. So our reports tab is sort of a pre-built report section where you can come in and pick a different report category, and we would export your transactions for, the period that you're indicating in this form as a CSV or Excel file that you can then, manipulate in Excel yourself. So this is also a good tool that a lot of our customers use when they're looking at data in bulk. And then the last tab is just the settings tab, which is where you can come in and make updates to your settings. So you can either do that from the settings tab or accessing it here from your business profile. But that's another thing that you should come in and regularly do is if anything updates with your business, whether maybe you add an integration or you're removing an integration, or if you have a new place where you've registered, we would want you to come into the customer portal to update those settings. So that way we're staying up to date with your filing. We have this help button in our global navigation. And so that's accessible on every page. If you click that, a panel will pop out, which will show all of the help articles that might be relevant for the page that you're on. We also have links to our help center, which is where all of the help documentation lives, and a link to Avalara University, which is the tool we use with sort of video-based courses if you really want to dive in and get more of that video-based content to help you either get set up or to learn a little bit more about tax. And then if you really get stuck and the help documentation isn't helping, you can file a support case through our account section where you can see the support cases you would have opened already or open up a new support case.